Hi, I'm Miles, and this is a disclaimer. What you're about to see is not supposed to be the greatest travel video ever made. This is just a tribute.
When the summer comes around, are you down again? Touchdown at the ground, it's high. Do you remember how it all began? Trees, and you can put me on the record saying I love you, even if it's 'cause we're high, top floor with the view. Vibes so fly and the fuck so few, but it wouldn't be fair if I didn't say that I owe it to you.
Now forgive me for stating the obvious, but you don't have to grade everything to death. After learning about a big wedding videographer in our field that didn't grade his footage at all once it had been out of camera, I was inspired. Now admittedly this is a weird video to be making for someone who's just released a course on colour grading in Final Cut Pro. There's still definitely a need to be able to correct and maybe even grade your footage, but with the way trends are going at the moment, this is a video I just thought I needed to make. And sure enough, what you just saw was me goofing around with my cheapest lenses. I wasn't even intending to make a video out of what I was shooting, I was just testing what could be graded in camera and what that would look like with no adjustments. So if you watch a bunch of YouTube filmmakers, if they're not using a Canon, then the chances are that they advocate shooting flat and then grading it in post. Now I'm not going to dispute that shooting flat is actually going to get you more dynamic range or more flexibility in post. That's certainly the way you want to go if you need to be flexible when it comes to the colour grade. But what if you haven't got the budget or the time to colour grade and you're not even sure your audience will notice the difference anyway? Even if you didn't want to grade too much and you were quite quick at doing it, say it took you 10 minutes to do a video, if you end up doing 100 videos a year, that's still 1,000 minutes of time that you spent, nearly 17 hours in the year. And imagine all the YouTube videos that you could smash in that time. I'm pretty confident if you've got a Fuji, a Sony, a Canon or a Panasonic, you can get awesome colour straight out of the camera. For example, Sony is often bashed for its colour and is reputed to have bad colour science out of camera, but Tony Northrup kind of blew that out of the water. His blind test exposed the fact that people often preferred its colour over Canon, so there's definitely smoke, mirrors and reputations pervading our judgment when it comes to these things. Now for corporate or some low budget work, I already do trust the Panasonic GH5 to give me a good neutral looking image on the natural profile mainly. But what if you want a look to it? That's where I wanted to see if I could get something stylistic or artistic straight out of camera. So in these clips I used a GH5 and I tweaked a few things. I started with natural, but I took out the sharpness and noise reduction as the footage is already sharp and I don't trust the camera's noise reduction. Then the only slightly creative element was to crush the shadows in camera. This is where you would do that in camera, and the clips you saw in the introduction were with the shadows crushed to -3. But for these next few in Venice, I thought I'd push that even further and I had the shadows all the way down to -5. Now I'm sure there are some purists out there that would have a heart attack about not capturing all the dynamic range possible and the loss of detail that we've got in the shadows by crushing them in camera, but I actually quite like that the GH5 isn't straining to give me all the detail in the shadows. That's where it's prone to get noise. But if you're the kind of colorist that likes crushing the blacks anyway because you think it looks arty or moody, then why not try that out in camera and see how it goes? And I think this is already a look that some people might go for. So how does that compare to other profiles in the camera? Well, I didn't do a massive test of this, but I did shoot the same scene in Vlog. Now see if you can tell which clip is Vlog and which clip is natural. Now that Vlog shot was graded just by adding the Vlog conversion look, which I gave away in the previous video. And I think that looks quite neutral and quite natural, especially next to the natural profile. They looked quite similar to my eye. But either way, Vlog I'm sure would hold up better to further grading if I really wanted to push those colours around. But how far would I need to push this grade before I do notice that difference, especially when the colour looks quite good already out of camera? Now it goes without saying you'll want to get good exposure and white balance in camera. Now if you're a beginner, I've got a course that will help you out with that as well. And if you nail those two things, you might have nothing to do then in post. Another benefit of shooting this way is the camera monitor is going to give you much better idea of your exposure and your white balance. It's almost a what you see is what you get kind of way of shooting, compared to Vlog where your waveform is compressed to between 15 and 80, and it's much harder to see what your white balance looks like and your exposure. Also, if you're doing client work, they might have a heart attack if you're playing that back in Vlog and they can't see any color or contrast. They might not understand what process that you'll be going through to get that looking good. Whereas if you shoot in natural or this amended natural profile, it's going to look straight away pretty good on the monitor. So they'll be much more confident and happy during the shoot when they can see that it's all coming together already. So I did say you'd have almost nothing to do in post. Well, here are a few things I did do to these clips. As I go through these clips, have a look up here to see that I've done absolutely nothing to the color. And there are only a few where I've had to change white balance because it was a bit dodgy in camera. This sunset one nope, that was fine. This one, I've definitely changed white balance. That was straight out of camera, and then a little bit fixed there to bring it to more neutral. But the rest of it, there's almost no changes to it. I've already got this silhouette kind of look straight out of camera, and I've not even had to grade that at all. Now there was one clip where I had to do a little bit of a correction. That was this one. So I don't know if you'd argue this is grading, but I would call this a color correction, or more specifically a secondary color correction. So I felt here that there was a lack of contrast and light on my subject, and I refined that by using a shape mask and a color mask. So I got the skin tones masked, and then I applied a shape mask so that it just picked up the skin tones in this area and nowhere else. So not everything needs a super creative look and a massive amount of time in post dealing with it. Now shooting in this particular profile, I'm not going to get much joy out of the shadows. I could try and lift this shot, for example, but I'm not going to get much detail out of here, and I'm soon going to get noise on the GH5 when I do that. So I am limited by shooting this way to getting what the camera gives me, which is this kind of silhouette look in this case, but I actually quite liked that. Now this approach won't be for everybody and every project, but I think there is a place for something like this. It can keep your look consistent and it could save you a bunch of time. By all means, if I had the budget or the time to do a proper grade for this kind of footage, I might not shoot this way, especially if there's a client involved and they want some input on the color. You don't want to corner yourself in by shooting a profile like this. But let me know what you think. Does it look decent? Is it something you might think of? Does the footage look good? Does it look garbage? If it looks garbage, at least sugarcoat it for me a little bit, but I would be interested to hear what you think, so let me know. Thanks a lot for watching this video and for saving my feelings. I'll see you in the next one.